We're your hosts,
Aaron Bacus
and Jason Kindler.
We like to sit down with our guests to hear their journey, their challenges, and how they impact the local community.
So grab a seat, tune in, and let's get inspired by Jacksonville's everyday workforce.
Welcome to Hometown Jax. I'm excited. We have Emily Turner with Action News Jax here today. Emily, thank you for coming on. That was awesome. I really appreciate that.
Well, I appreciate you having me on. I'm excited to be here.
What does it feel like as a random person asking you to come on a podcast? Although you probably do that for your job a lot too.
Well, I'm never in this seat. I'm usually in your seat.
Okay.
Which is, I was joking with somebody. I was like, it feels a little weird and backwards to be on the receiving end of questions when I feel like I'm usually the one asking them. And but I'm excited to be here. I'm excited to be here for sure.
Well, no, we want to learn about your story, your job, some things going on, some stories you've done. I mean, what an interesting job. You have to be kind of a tough person to do that job, I would think.
I think you have to be a couple of things. You have to be a tough person because, especially with the TV element, because people can be really petty about the dress you wear, the earrings you've got on, how you look.
I was thinking about the people you're interviewing.
And also that, yeah. And then you have to be able to stomach the hard questions that you're going to ask people, and then you're usually pissing somebody off.
Right.
In investigative journalism, you're not usually sticking a microphone in their face because they've done something phenomenal.
Right. I get that. Well, you've done a lot phenomenal, and this is going to be positive here. There's no hard questions on Hometown Jax. So,
okay, perfect.
I'm excited to talk about your history. So you've worked in a lot of places, Mobile, Alabama, to Orlando, to Tucson, to San Francisco. I mean, is that kind of the normal progression in TV? Like you just go wherever it is?
Yeah. So the way television news works is every city in the country, or I guess we would call it a designated market area, has a ranking based on the number of televisions that are in that area.
Interesting.
So number 1 is New York, number 2 LA, 3 Chicago, and all the way down to, well, when I first started, it was like Glendive, Montana was market 212. And so when you want to move up, usually you have to move out. And they're not always geopolitical areas. So like Jacksonville's DMA or demographic area is Jacksonville, all the way up to Brunswick, quite a bit of Georgia, some of the neighboring counties, all the way out to Baker, Columbia, Lake City, and back up. And so that's our area. So yeah, I started in what would be considered a smaller market, but still relatively large considering. Because
Mobile's decent size.
Mobile is what we would call an artificially large market because it's Mobile, Pensacola, Fort Walton Beach.
Okay.
But the station I was at really only covered Mobile. And it was market 48, I think, at the time.
And you went there right out of school?
Right, and I was really lucky because as a Gator grad. Go Gators.
Absolutely.
They have a phenomenal journalism program.
I've always heard that. I was going to ask you about that, but yeah, that's awesome. Is that a graduate program after? Or
no, it's an undergraduate program. So through the communications department, they have all of these majors that are broken down, and you can get pretty granular, and I did. So I got all the way into news, telecommunication news, which is specifically what I do for a living. And so for the last 3 semesters that I was in school, I was literally anchoring a live newscast once a day. I was, and I was turning stories on deadline in the field that were part of that broadcast. And so I graduated with a practicum-based education that really suited me up for the real world. I mean, it doesn't mean I wasn't drowning at the beginning, because it's one thing to turn one story once a day or one day of the week, and another thing to be on deadline every day.
Oh, I'm sure. Well, TV 20 was the station in Gainesville.
Yeah, the WJCB.
Work with them at all in school?
No, we competed against them, actually, because WUFT was the
college kind of,
and it was a PBS station, but we had a half-hour newscast at 5:00 that my last semester, my senior year, I anchored that.
Wow.
And then I came out of school with a resume tape, and luckily, because I had done an internship at First Coast News, I'm probably the only person in this industry, in this town, that's worked at all 3 newsrooms. Unless you're a photographer, they make the rounds a little bit more. But I was an intern and then an assistant producer at First Coast News.
Okay.
So the news director there, a guy named Mike McCormick, was my news director as an intern. He ultimately ended up in Mobile, Alabama, and gave me my first job.
Wow.
I don't know that it was on the strength of my tape, but he knew that I was a hard worker, took a risk.
What he was going to get.
Paid me a measly salary and make it work.
I have heard that, Emily, that while your profession is so glamorous, that a lot of times the beginning compensation is not so glamorous.
No, I mean, 28.5. That's what I started out making in 2007.
Wow. And when you went to Mobile, were you anchoring?
No, I was what you call a one-man band. Okay. So it was me and this like massive TV camera with a brick of a battery on the back and an old tripod. And I was just like I had to like take the bag out of the back of the Explorer. So I shot, pitched.
So you didn't have a team with you?
No, I did it all.
Okay.
In the beginning. And then I stayed there for 2 years. My second year, I'd been promoted throughout the ranks. My first, I was just what you call an MMJ or a one-man band in the Mobile area. Then I became the Baldwin County Bureau Chief. And Baldwin County is the county that's in between Mobile and Florida. Mm-hmm. And it's super interesting because it's pretty agrarian, rural in the northern portion, but then you've got Gulf Shores, Perdido Key. And so I kept a beach chair, a towel, and a bathing suit in the back of my Ford Explorer, and I would shoot my stand-ups on the front end of the day and my interviews, and then I would log the sound and write my story sitting on the beach.
Interesting.
And then go edit it. I didn't happen to work out that way every day, but sometimes it did.
And when you say bureau chief, you were in charge of what stories went on.
Mm-hmm. Nobody else really covered Baldwin County. And so I'd wake up in the morning, and this is like shoe leather style journalism, really, where we had a guy who was the bureau chief who retired after years. He took me around and introduced me to all these people. And so I created a binder, and I was like, okay, who is the mayor of Foley, Alabama? What's the police chief's name? And so every morning I would wake up and make beat calls, and I'd be called dispatch. I'd be like, hey, what happened overnight? Or hey, whatever, And so, every single morning, and I would take notes in the margin, like Marcia's son had a t-ball tournament this weekend. Be sure to ask about it on Monday. So then on Monday, because it's what I do is about building relationships, especially with investigative journalism, is people have to trust you. They have to know you to trust you. And when you have conversations with people, that's where information comes.
So your job really is very entrepreneurial in that fact that you're finding your own stories. They're not like, hey, go report on this. Like, you're going to do it.
I've thought about getting out of news so many times, and I think everybody who's been in it this long and seen just the rise and fall of the market has had those thoughts. Nobody ever wants to hire an investigative journalist though because of this lack of experience. But if you think about what we're really capable of doing, it's like, do I have sales experience? Well, I can have convinced people who maybe their attorney told them not to talk, but they went on the record and talked to me about something. Yeah. I can build relationships where I can get information before anybody else. I am confident enough to ask questions that challenge someone, but in a respectful way, so that I can, ask the tough questions and get the answers that we need. Our skill set as reporters specifically is so far-reaching. Like, if anybody needs a communications expert, hire a reporter, because we know how to tell a story, we can market, we can do all that stuff because it really rolls in to what we do every single day on deadline. And you can do it on a time frame. Mm-hmm. That's really great way to think about it. So then you went Mobile to Orlando, Orlando being a bigger market. Mm-hmm. Were you sitting behind a desk then, like doing anchoring? No, I didn't anchor until until I came to Jacksonville and I filled in here. And I don't know how much I want to say about that. So I thought I was going to be getting an anchor position when I came back here. I was at Channel 4. That didn't happen. There were some leadership changes in place. But that's ultimately what I wanted to do. And so I was in Jacksonville. I was home for about 3 years. And so I think I worked every single day part at that point. I filled in anchoring. I had enough of a tape, and then moved to Tucson, Arizona as a full-time anchor. I anchored our morning show out there, which was, wake up at 2 a.m. That's what I was going to ask you when you woke up. Wake up at 2 a.m. Are you a morning person? I am. Well, I had to be then. You fake it till you make it. I was up at 2. I was on the air, dressed, ready to go, 4:30. Wow. Yeah. That's tough. It was. I just had to tell myself I was going to pretend to be living on East Coast hours the whole time. Well, that's a good point. Even though I was in Tucson. And it was a weird transition going from Florida to the desert. Yeah. I was like, have I landed on Mars? But there's like a unique beauty.
Now, when you're anchoring, though, are the stories written for you, so that you're not doing that in addition to worrying about anchoring at the same time?
Correct. So you have the producers are the ones who are behind the computers that say, okay, these are the stories. They what you call stack the show. We're going to start with this as our lead. We're going to go to here. We're going to go to here. We're going to go to here, and they write it. And then it's my job as the anchor, if I'm doing my job correctly, is I come in, I'll read through the shows. If I need to make a correction, I can make a correction or a suggestion, and then I read it on a prompter.
Okay.
Because my show was only in the morning, but I was still working a full-time week, I was then on our special projects investigative team. So I would turn stories not on a day tight deadline, but I would put things together ultimately for what we call sweeps, which are our big ratings periods. There's 4 of them.
Right. It seems like all of that challenge, and then also making sure you're telling the story right, and that you're not, I'm assuming someone has to kind of approve the story too. Like it's like a collaborative thing to make sure you're not going in the wrong direction.
A newsroom has very specific jobs that everybody has to do their job correctly or it throws the whole machine off. Mm-hmm. And there's layers of approval and there's layers of who's touching a story when. So in the morning, for example, the way our day goes is we have a morning meeting, 9:30 editorial meeting. Weather comes in, says what's going on. Does this need to be played up higher or lower in the show? Then we'll go through what happened overnight that was in the morning show. Do we need to put a day side or what would be your 5 or 6 o'clock reporter on it? Mm-hmm. And then we'll go through and everyone will say their pitches. Like what are the stories that they've come up with or that they think they should be doing today? Those assignments go out. In that meeting is the producer, the reporters, sometimes the anchors, and then 2 layers of managers involved as well as a promotions person. And so then the reporters will go out, they'll do their story. They're regularly in communication with the managers at the station. A manager will always read and approve a script before it goes on the air. Another manager, usually an executive producer, is reading through the scripts that are what an anchor would read. Mm-hmm. Plus the anchor has eyeballs on it. Mm-hmm. And because I'm one of our more experienced reporters and a local and an anchor, I'm usually in the morning meeting to help with kind of local color, if you will. Or like, here's the person you should call. This is the part of town you need to go to. This is the context behind whatever. And all of this happens between 9:30 and we go, our first show that I anchor, we go on is at 4 p.m. And, you know, and these reporters, a lot of times are doing 2 different stories in 2 completely different parts of town. It's a lot that goes into it.
Oh, I'm absolutely sure. And then, so you're always reading off script, though.
Well,
do you ever go off? Assuming sometimes you do.
So when I anchor, I'll read my script. I read that off the prompter. If I have there's like some thing I want to ad lib, then I'll do it. I mean, usually the moments between the anchor and weather or a toss to sports or something, those are like genuine interactions. Yeah. We're not being like, hey, I'm going to joke with you about this thing. Because it would be so obviously canned. Yeah. And some people make it easier. I mean, with you've had Mike Burrish on, and we have so many wonderful people at the station. It's actually really easy. I used to co-anchor with Ben Becker on the weekends. And he and I would always joke about stuff too. Yeah. So that's kind of when you go off script or what you would call like a toss. Right. When I toss the, words or like the camera off to somebody else. Yeah. But for the most part, my stuff is scripted. For the reporters, they know what they're saying in their intro and their outro.
Because they're always looking at their phones.
Right. Because it's already been approved. But most of the time, and see, when I was in the field, which I'm not what you would call general assignment anymore, but I can't script it. Like it doesn't, I will trip all over myself. Right. I just have to be like, okay, I'm going to say, I'll script it so that it gets approved. And I'm like, this is the gist of what I'm going to say. But I'll say, okay, these are the 2 bullet points. And because for me, it's more conversational. And I think it comes across that way too.
No, I'm right there with you. And then you jump up San Francisco, huge market.
Well, actually, so I left this out of my bio because it's kind of an aside, but I got out of news for a bit and I did sports.
Sports reporting? Or?
Yes. Okay. So I, the whole time I was in Jacksonville, I was also a CrossFit coach.
Oh, wow.
And I did some media stuff locally.
I did see that you had some stand-up comedy experience.
I did improv. Yeah, I did. When I was in Tucson, I did improv comedy.
Okay.
I performed improv comedy. But
so shy really isn't part of your DNA.
No. Yeah, outgoing is probably right up there. But so I ended up working for CrossFit corporate. I did all their sideline reporting, for the CrossFit Games. One of the years, the last year I was with them, I anchored the CrossFit Games International Update Show. I mean, the CrossFit Games had a bigger budget than the Super Bowl. It was wild.
Wow, I didn't know that.
And so I did all that stuff. And then I was bought out of my contract in Arizona by the former head of media from CrossFit, a guy named Tony Budding. Started a spinoff of CrossFit that aired on NBC Sports Network. So he signed with NBCSN. I was like, all right, I'll take a risk. He bought me out of my contract in TV news in Tucson, moved me to Santa Cruz, California, because that's where CrossFit was based. He lived, and so he just planted there. And so we started this entire new league that was CrossFit-style movements, but made for television. It ended up going under, and there was a lot of drama that went on with that. But I did all the media stuff on air, and then also when it came to the league stuff, I did our out-facing media and all that. I mean, it was quite a bit. And so then it went under, and they were like, here's 3 days severance. And I was like, cool.
3 days.
3 days.
Oh, perfect.
I'm like, I'm living in California.
Yeah, right.
What am I going to do? And so I was like, I guess I'll go back into news. I started freelancing in San Francisco.
Freelancing meaning like you can go to all the stations, say, hey, here are my credentials, hire me when you want. Yeah,
I mean, it took me a little while to like, it went under in October. I went to a station called Cron, and I think I started with there in February. So there was some downtime, but I took a great road trip in between. But basically it means I'm not a contracted employee. So they can terminate me at any time with or without cause. Like I don't get paid as much. I don't get the same kind of benefits. And so I was just freelancing there. I was still got 40 hours a week.
Yeah.
But then the competition, the CBS owned and operated station, which I can specify the difference between those in a minute, but saw me on the air. Their managing editor messaged me on LinkedIn and was like, hey, are you happy at that station? And I was like, nope. He was like, you want to come over? And I was like, sure. And so I got a full-time job at KPIX, which is the CBS O&O or owned and operated. Yeah. And what most people don't know about an O&O versus a TV station and how this works is most TV stations in the United States are owned by a company. We're owned by Cox Media Group, which is technically owned by Apollo, a holding company. We have the license to air Fox and CBS's programming.
That clears up some confusion.
Right. And because we get emails all the time about, because from the perception, the networks are in different places,
they're
right?
Not supposed to be on the same.
Right. And we still get emails about that, but we just have, all that means is their national programming is what we have. Whereas CBS owned and operated stations or Fox owned and operated stations, they're mostly only in the big cities now, but that means the network does own them. So I was technically a CBS employee for 7 years, and all of our stuff was CBS, like in that way. And so it just is a different chain.
Yeah.
But so then that's how I got back into news. And then I was in San Francisco for 7 years, which is very different than Jacksonville.
Oh, very different. Yeah, many ways. And then you ended up coming back here. Now, where did you grow up? Did you grow up around here in Jacksonville?
Born and raised.
So you circled. So was your mission to come back here?
I think what I'd always said earlier in my career, because when you're young and hungry and you don't have a family,
right.
The numbers matter on what your designated market area, what DMA you're in, and how big you can get, and how much you get paid. So my thought was always go to as high as I can or as high as I want to, and then come home. And then when you've done what I did in a bigger market, you can do what I did coming home, which is have a little more control in figuring out what you're going to do in a smaller market.
Because you have a bigger resume, but you're willing to come to a smaller market.
Right.
So that gives you some leverage, I would think.
Yeah. And
That's
so
awesome.
I went from, I did everything when I was in San Francisco. I did weather, I did traffic. I was a field reporter. I anchored. I launched our streaming show, CBSN Bay Area, like all of it. So it just was time.
Yeah. Well, now you're back and you have 2 boys.
2 boys.
Awesome. What ages are they?
So my oldest is 5.
Okay.
And the youngest he'll be 2 in July.
How do you do this job with 2 young kids?
It's really hard.
Yeah, right.
Luckily, I have a wonderful TV station, and I cannot say how grateful I am for them enough, because it's not always this way in news. The thing that allows me to do it is, number one, I'm not doing day turns where I have to like go out and whatever. So like I can go to the Mother's Day thing in the middle of the day on my lunch break or do a podcast, because my deadlines are further apart.
You're doing deeper stories.
Right. I just have to, and they should take longer.
Yeah.
I just have to, be back at the station at 2:33 to anchor the 4:00 news.
Yeah.
So that has been wonderful. And then I've got support. I mean, I have
awesome.
my dad passed away. I was actually lucky. I got to spend time with him when I got back before he passed. But my mom's still here. I've got a bunch of friends who are still here.
Awesome.
So but it is not. I mean, it is.
Do they know mom's on the TV?
Yeah, it's so funny. So it was actually really cute. For the Mother's Day thing at his school, they write, they have questions they have to answer. And it was like, my mom, when she goes to work, she works at Action News Jax. Sometimes it was like tracing it around this picture, this not very flattering portrait of me, but he's 5, where it was like she goes to Action, or she works at Action News Jax, and sometimes I see her on TV and she wears beautiful dresses, and I was like, oh, nice.
Wears beautiful dresses. Like, that's kind of a funny thing a kid says. Like, that's a compliment.
It is.
That makes up for the non-flattering picture.
It does. Sure. It does. All the emails I get that are like, your earrings are making me seasick, or whatever random thing.
How cool is that? Like, you went out into the big world, made it, and came back to little old Jacksonville. That's awesome. I
love it. I'm so glad to be home. I mean, this is where I'm born and raised. My family's still here. I know, I'm still really well connected.
Yeah.
I want to see Jacksonville thrive.
Absolutely.
And I feel like the investigative part of that maybe makes it a better place.
Pushes it forward. Yeah, for sure. Going into your stories, like, can you remember one of the most impactful stories you've done? Like, does something come to your head, like at the top of your list? Like, wow, that really moved me.
Well, I mean, when it comes to impact, there have been, everything I do is kind of a series, because when you start to dig into something and you pull on the yarn, the whole thing unravels, and you're like, oh, there is not just one, there's, a series of stories.
Right.
And all of these have resulted in some kind of change. Like the first one I really did when I came back was it was called Return to Recycle. And it was station wide, but I did the investigative element of it when they suspended recycling. And so we dug in and found out, oh, this one makes more than this one, and this one is whatever. And I do feel like the pressure we put on the administration ultimately got that back sooner than it would have been. And that was a group effort with everybody at the station. Then there was one, it was called Troubled Ride to School.
Okay.
And it was about a couple of years ago, kids were just getting left on the side of the road. Buses were late. They didn't show up.
Oh, man.
They weren't getting home for hours. They were overcrowded. It was a mess.
Yeah.
And we looked into it and held the company specifically that had the most problems accountable. And as a result of our coverage, well, I mean, I can't unequivocally say that, but after our coverage, a DCPS ultimately canceled 2 of the contracts they had with the company. And
then, how did you find out about a story? Like, did parents find you?
There were enough parents who were complaining about it, and I was like, this is a trend.
Complaining to you?
Sometimes they'll email the newsroom.
Right.
Sometimes they'll call the newsroom. And it we did a couple of stories. Oh, and then there was that same company had wheels falling off the bus on the highway. It was wild.
Boy.
And I'm like, this is a problem.
Yeah.
And so one of the first things I always do is pull the contract. And when you read through it, inevitably there's something that's not happening. And as you start to ask questions and dig, you're like, oh, but what about this? And then this, and then this. And it always leads to more.
Yeah, for sure. Well, that is big. Did you know you wanted to be a journalist from day one?
Yeah. It's
literally as soon as you thought about what you want to do with your life, you knew that?
I mean, I think when I was in the 4th grade, I said I want to be the first female president, but that ship has sailed.
It's still time.
You know what? There's no, thank you. I cover politics, so now I don't need to be in it.
Right.
No, I remember reading as a kid. I used to read Archie comics all the time, and there was one comic where Archie like had to get an extracurricular, and so he worked for the school paper, and he did investigative journal. He stumbled upon this story where city trucks were paving personal driveways or something, and then everybody thought this was so great, and yay, Archie! And that, for whatever reason, stuck with me. And so, I have a little bit of a Joan of Arc complex, and I also did theater in high school, and it was just a way to kind of dovetail all of the interests. I'm so very lucky because I found a position and a job that tailors itself so well to who I am and what my interests are and my strengths, that I never had to have, there was no quandary like, oh, what am I going to do?
It's funny that all the people I've interviewed on the podcast, a majority of them knew, like right off, like you talked about Mike Burrish. I mean, I think he like was born, and like the minute he was born, he was looking at the weather.
I know.
That's basically how he described it. So
his first word was cumulus.
Yeah, that's amazing. That's amazing.
We'll get back to the story in just a second, but while you're listening, here's something you should know if you live in Northeast Florida. If you're self-employed and trying to buy a home, it's not as hard as you might think. We work with business owners, freelancers, and creatives every single day. People who don't fit the traditional housing mold, and we're here to let you know that we have real loan programs that make homeownership possible. We've helped tons of local business owners and creatives get approved using flexible loan options that work for them and their business. First Coast Mortgage Funding is proud to sponsor Hometown Jax right here in Jacksonville.
Do you remember the first time going on camera?
Yeah.
You do remember the first time?
I was about
Were
ready
you petrified?
Puke in a bush almost. Like it was, I will never forget it. It was Mobile, Alabama. There was the story was, it would have been 2007. There was a cyclist who had been hit and killed by a drunk driver in Baldwin County, and he was in jail. And it was my first live shot ever. Like when you're recording it, it's different.
Right.
Because you can
you just know.
do another take.
Yeah.
When it's live, you better get it right.
Right.
Or you're going to embarrass yourself, which I have also done plenty of times.
Of course. Yeah.
I was outside the jail, and I just remember being so stressed and so nervous.
Oh, so you were on site doing that? Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, a live shot.
Not to mention you were at a jail, which isn't probably the most welcoming place.
It's not, but I wasn't thankfully inside. I was outside of it. But where it was, they have these windows that are, they could stand up and see out the window, and they would bang on the window.
Yeah, right. That's
which
what
is,
I was figuring.
It's like, well, I'm only going to be on TV for the first time ever. Why not throw some inmates banging on windows in there too?
I'm sure
just for
the
fun.
things they were saying weren't the best. And I'm envisioning this business you're in to be very competitive. Like, so I know you might have described it a little bit, but can you remember like, oh, I really got to the next level, like an event or something? Was that in Mobile?
Well, I was really lucky with that, and there was a moment where at that time in the industry, it was super competitive. I mean, people were still coming out. 2008 hadn't happened. Streaming hadn't happened. Like smartphones hadn't happened.
So when you say that, now there's more options for people to do?
That's a whole conversation about the death of television. But if you think about it, the business model for local news and any television station, regular television station, is advertising dollars. Advertising dollars are based on how many eyeballs watch your station, and that's what sweeps or ratings months are for. They count those. It's kind of an antiquated system, but I don't make the rules. And so there's only a finite number of eyeballs. And if you look at it as a pie, well, it used to be just over the air. It used to be only 3 channels. So you could charge whatever, like a ton of money. And it used to be that people who were in my industry, I mean, they lived large. Some of the salaries and like the lifestyles back, like just even in like the early 2000s, very different. Because then there's cable. And now there are more slices of the pie. And then there's a smartphone that's going to take eyeballs away. And then everybody's cutting the cord with streaming. And there's not we can't touch that money. I mean, we could create a streaming channel, but like, who's doing that? And so we have had the piece. I was on our union negotiating team in California, and they brought out this like bar chart, and I'm like, I get it, diminishing revenue, because you have fewer and fewer eyeballs, so you charge
More
less.
competition.
In the meantime, it's not like the cost of doing television has gotten any cheaper.
Right.
If anything, the opposite.
It's interesting to me though that I still feel like that the being local has a niche, like, you know, being the local news station versus like if the national one would be taken away by my phone more than I like knowing what's going on locally. It feels that that's more valuable. I don't know.
Well, that's my soapbox and if I ever wrote a book, it would be it would be about the value of local. Like, where can you have the most impact? What impacts someone the most? It's your city government. It's your school board. It is your elected council members. Like, people like to think that they're so much smarter than other people because they know what's going on internationally and nationally. And while those things are important, like, does that really impact your day to day?
No.
Do you know what does impact your day to day is what happened in the state legislature about school start times. Like, that dramatically matters. Whether you're allowed to ban books or not. What are we a sanctuary city or not? Like, impactful things that truly affect people's lives happen at the local level.
Right.
And it feels like people just don't care as much as they used to. There's just been this loss of community that local news, to your point, really brings to the table, where it's like, I can have a conversation about who the second largest employer is in the city and know what's happening. And like, I know when I need to be upset about something, and some people, it's just, they don't care anymore. And I think that's such a shame. Yeah,
for sure. That's definitely a whole different podcast there. It's probably information overload and the feeling of, does it really matter?
Well,
can I even do anything about it, you know?
And that's super frustrating. I think that for years, there's carried some weight as a scare factor to maybe like, oh my gosh, this reporter is going to put it on the news and I'll be on blast. Well, it just carries less weight now. And so while I've been able to affect change, I haven't been able to affect as much change as I think needs to have been made for that reason. Because people don't pay attention. It allows for things to happen in the shadows. It allows for backroom deals that don't exist in the sunshine, which they're legally required to do. It allows the good old boy network to, behind the scenes, make very big decisions that impact everybody, but only a few are privy to.
Which is really was the main focus of news all along, really, to make people honest.
Yeah.
You know?
That's I mean, that's the whole point of journalism, you know, when it is done well. And there have been versions that have been bastardized. There's, I think, the misperception that what happens on the national level is the same that happens locally. It's not. It's very different. And what really has it's, you know, I care so much about what I do, and so much about it has to do with trust. And they do trust surveys. And it used to be forever that the least trusted job in the country was to be a politician. But that's now journalists, which is wild to me. And I think so dangerous. And
I feel like that's, I mean, just thinking how I think of it is more of a national, though. I feel like
it
the
is
local
very
people
different.
Still have credibility.
It is. It is. We've done surveys on it. Our ownership company is really great about doing research, and we did a trust survey about this. And it used to be that we were kept different. It was like church and state, so to speak. But that started to trickle down now to the local level. But what I think has some part in that is we all get bunched together as one, but we're very different in the way we operate. The 24-hour news cycle didn't do anybody any favors, because in order to fill it, you just have talking heads who are spewing editorial content that isn't news content, and it's not branded enough that people understand the difference. And so, you know, pontificating about one political viewpoint and then having somebody counter it isn't the same. It's just different.
Right. No, I'm right there with you. How do you decide what stories to investigate? I imagine that you've gotten to a certain stature, they just start coming to you now.
Yeah, for
and
the
I'm
most
like,
part.
You're probably looking through a lit, like, no, okay, I need to. Is that kind of how it works, or?
Yeah, there's a funny. I'll tell you a funny story about this question. Somebody asked me this question once in a bathroom, and I answered it honestly, and with the next question ended up someone was in my face over it. So it was because she didn't like the story that I had done. I was like, oh, so I'm appreciative to have the question asked in a way that you actually know the answer and not get in my face about it. No, so there's a couple of ways. One of them is a tip. And those come in. That's how the JTA series started.
To you, so like, do you have sources? Like you do. Really cool.
And you know, and it doesn't necessarily mean that I like go to them and they're a spigot that I turn on and they give me a story. Right. It's like I'm connected or friends with, or, you know, network with people who are well connected, who have their finger on the pulse, or who are in meetings about whatever, and we'll get information. And then it's incumbent upon me to do the legwork and the digging on that. But sometimes it'll be a tip. Sometimes it's a source. Sometimes it'll be something like the recycling, like this thing is happening. Why is it happening? And it's my job to then like double click into it and then go down that rabbit hole to get to the bottom of why this problem is, you know, existing.
Well, if you're investigating, do you have the opposite sometime where you like say it's a company and you go to them and they're like, yeah, I mean, here it is. I don't think anything's wrong. I don't know what you're talking about. Like they're more open than closed.
Usually people are not. Yeah. I mean, I try to give people the benefit of the doubt and every opportunity to respond. There was one situation that happened with the city where I could not get an answer, and I emailed asking for an interview with this one person 8 different times. And I'm like, okay, why are you going to make me jump out of a bush?
Right.
I do not want to jump out of a bush. This is not the kind of reporter I am. So I had to sit and wait and like accost him at City Hall.
Oh, so literally you waited for him to come out.
Yeah. And I was like, hey, I want to talk to you about whatever. And then it was, you know, a whole thing. He like walked back behind the way. And then finally I ended up getting the sit down interview, but not before he ran away. And that was on camera and you look like you ran away.
Right.
Like just sit down.
Right.
And if there's really nothing to it, then there's nothing to it. There's almost always something to it, but there's another layer of explanation, which is why you get the other side of things.
Right.
Because especially investigative stuff, it's so nuanced. It's never like, oh, let me wrap this all up for you in 3 minutes and you're going to cover all of it.
It's this or that. It's always in between.
Right.
Probably.
And so whatever you see on TV, like the JTA stuff is the perfect example. I've been investigating the Jacksonville Transportation Authority for more than a year. And all of the public records requests haven't necessarily made it into a story, but what they have helped me do is build the context of how this organization is run, how they spend their money, how they do business and treat their employees. I mean, I have a full filing cabinet of more than 50 public records requests full of just JTA. I had there's a whole whiteboard that is like, was this fulfilled? Have I followed up on it? And I still have it because like one day I feel like, I don't know. I'm proud of the work that I've done.
I'm feeling like ChatGPT is going to be a really big help for you.
I don't know. I mean, it makes me nervous because so much of my career has been like analog.
Yeah.
You know, I'm still it's so funny to go to press conferences. I don't go to them very often anymore, but when I do, I carry a notepad and like I have a desk calendar that's large and I have to print out the documents I'm going to read because
okay, you're old school.
That's how I am.
That's fine.
Meanwhile, everybody else, all these like 20-somethings, they're like boop, 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 boop.
Can you remember a story that was terrifying? And what I mean, like, if you're investigating, are you ever concerned? Are you fearful? Like something may happen to me?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I think we've seen it happen locally. So I wasn't here for the JEA stuff, but in the trial, you know, it came out that Nate Monroe, who was like on top of it, that there had been private investigators paid to follow him. Now, nothing happened to him, like nothing necessarily ever came from it, but like, what if something had happened or what if they had found something unsavory? Like, what would they do with that?
Right.
I think in investigative journalism, when you start messing or digging into things that are high dollar, high stakes, or high emotion, that it gets dangerous. I mean, and there was an investigative reporter who was shot and killed in Vegas by a politician. I can't remember what the investigation was now, but killed him.
Wow.
You know, I mean, it's not.
I guess these days and times, everything's on the table. I mean,
Yeah.
you know, nothing is sacred anymore. What is speaking of technology, what does the future look for news? Like, how is tech being rolled in? I would imagine your editing and things like that are becoming faster, and you can do that more. Like,
yeah, I mean, so when I was in college, in journalism school, we edited. You shot video on a tape, and then it's called deck to deck or linear editing. So you had a tape in this thing and a tape in this thing, and then you had a dial on this side and a dial on this side, and you would like fast forward, mark your end point, mark where it's going to start recording here, hit go, hit end, whatever. I mean, it was, if you messed up once, you were so screwed. Like, it was brutal, but you had to think about it in a this and this. Well, then it became nonlinear. Everything was digital, so you would digitize the footage. And then you can just like boop, boop, like Tetris, put it in different places. Oh, undo it. It's fine. I don't have to start over from scratch. And so it's so much faster.
Right.
And one of the things that has saved me a ton of time is the AI logging. So, my interviews are long, and, it might be a 30-minute long interview, or maybe I'm at a board meeting and I got to figure out where this soundbite is. I plug it into the one I use is called Trent. You have to pay to have a subscription, but I plug it in and drop the file, and then it logs it. I know the time code. It'll pull up a video box for me.
It's so cool.
Oh my gosh. It has saved me so much time.
Right.
Like, I remember when I'd have to be like jotting down the time code on a notepad and be like, this is the time code. Here you go. And like writing it down that way. So it's so much easier to do that. Other people use chat. We had a whole seminar on this, that other ways we can use it. But I get really nervous about AI in other ways, because while there is so much human error, how do you know what's being sampled?
Right.
Yeah.
And then who's inputting that? Yeah,
right.
That's definitely a concern for sure. But it's out of the bag.
I know.
So,
one day I worry. One day it's going to be like a hologram of Emily Turner anchoring the 4:00 news.
Well, it's funny. I saw some interview with Elon Musk, and they asked him, like, okay, you've seen the movie Terminator, right? Elon, like, yeah. So what are the chances, like, that happens to us? He goes, 20%. Yeah. I'm like, oh God.
I know.
I don't want 20%. It seems too high.
Exactly. But you know what? If they want to make a hologram of my voice and my likeness, but still pay me the same to not actually show up, I am here for that.
All game. Yeah, for sure. Do you have any role models?
There's a guy by the name of Bob Dotson.
Okay.
Who used to, his segment was called On the Road with Bob Dotson. And he told stories, which I think is something we don't have in news as much anymore because of time constraints and story counts and just deadlines. But they were these beautifully told stories where these characters came to life and they meant something. It wasn't hard news necessarily, but I would go back and just like watch his stories all the time. And some of them would bring me to tears. And then I remember when I was in Tucson, Arizona, he followed me on Twitter and I fell out. I was like, what? Oh my gosh. So from a professional standpoint, yeah.
Wow. Interesting. So how does someone get you a story? Like, what's the best way to do it? Just send you an email?
Email.
Yeah.
eTurner@actionnewsjax.com.
That's what I love about you news people. You put your email out there. It's very easy to find. That's how I got you on here.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, Mike gave me, but that's how I got Mike.
Right.
So you're very accessible. I've always thought it's funny when people are in a business where they want to talk to people and they don't make it very easy to access them.
No. I mean, I have no qualms. My inbox is a scary place. Yeah, I'll be honest, for a variety of reasons, whether it's like a viewer complaint or a tip or just spam. But I'm always welcome to have a conversation with people. And I'm happy to listen. Sometimes I can do something. Sometimes I can't.
Do you get a lot of people that are kind of selling you down a river, that are kind of wasting your time because it makes them feel good?
No, I mean, I have people who, I can't help because I'm like, well, did you file a police report or have you filed a complaint or have you done, because people need to do their own due diligence. I'm not here to solve people's problems if they've not helped themselves in any way, shape or form at that point, because otherwise my answer is like, okay, we'll file a complaint and then see if that resolves it. There are channels and avenues to do it. but I don't I haven't gotten anybody who's made things up completely.
Yeah. Well, that's good.
I mean, and there's some tips I get that are legitimate, and we can't go with it because somebody doesn't want to go on the record, or
right.
There's some legal reason. It's just the amount of work I do compared to the amount of stories I put on the air is very different.
Oh, I'm sure.
Yeah.
The tons more work than goes on the air. Mm-hmm. I envision you knocking on a lot of doors.
Not anymore. I do make a lot of calls.
Yes.
And I do a lot of, they're not beat checks anymore, but I'm like, you know what? I haven't checked in with this person lately. Let me just call and catch up.
See what you can.
And see, how things are going. Be like, what's going on? And inevitably in some capacity, there'll be some thing like, oh yeah, well, did you hear about the blah, blah, blah?
Seems like you're a master networker too.
I don't know about that. I think I just genuinely like people and like talking.
Well, and like helping and solving problems. Speaking of that, I pulled some of the stories that you've rolled out or working on. The JTA board. There's a couple things here. Military switches to a new company. What was that about?
So the United States military has a thing called Transcom, and they're in charge of logistics and moving all of military members, and they changed up the way they do it.
Okay.
It used to be that there's this what's called the legacy system, and if you're a moving company, then you could go to any different ones, right? And it's based on satisfaction surveys and whatever. And they had some trouble with it. One of our former reporters did some work with a local company that had some issues, and ultimately they ended up, you know what, we're not going to just have all these different companies. We are going to take it and we're going to make it one company that's under this umbrella, so that if something happens, their term was one throat to choke. Then we're going to do it that way. But it has turned into quite a cluster because the company that won the bid after like a years-long fight, legal battle,
takes advantage.
Didn't have the infrastructure in place, and so in the meantime, military members are waiting weeks for their stuff. Like this one woman I talked to, they had to go out and buy all new stuff for him because he had to deploy before his stuff got there. Oh my gosh,
how silly is that? It kind of reminds me of the story of the recycling in Clay County. Like they hire a company that's not even capable of doing it.
Right.
It's kind of crazy.
Like if it's almost like instead of putting out a request for proposals or bids, put out a request for qualifications. Like, are you even qualified to do this? Let this be the first benchmark. And then once we know that you're actually capable of doing the job, then you can bid on it.
Yeah, and then prove to us you can do it for sure. And then some of the stories, renovations for the stadium. That's really cool to talk about. Ride-alongs. I'm sure you've been with police a lot of times in your life.
Yeah.
It's got to be pretty interesting. They do a very hard job. Nonprofit law firm faces funding threats. Multi-million-dollar scheme, leave families with ACH coverage, no insurance. Scam, how to avoid for a QR code. That's actually pretty relevant to most people. Like we all just take QR codes for being legit.
If you ever see a sticker over it, don't think it's because they've updated it. I would just not use the QR code.
Not use it. No. Yeah, it goes somewhere else. How to protect your data, and the stories go on and on. You were super accomplished. It was really good reading about everything that you've done. Well,
the other part is because I have three hats. So I anchor the 4 o'clock news. I'm our lead investigator. And then I also do a show on Sunday called This Week in the 904, which I love. It's our community affairs show and public policy. So it's basically a half-hour show where we do this. And we'll have community leaders, politicians, stakeholders, big developers on. And it's a half-hour show where we talk about Jacksonville local-centric issues. So I've had Mark Lamping on, Dr. Bernier from the superintendent of DCPS. I just interviewed Tim Forson, the outgoing superintendent from St. Johns County. Super nice guy.
Tim is nice. I had him. He spoke at one of our things a couple of years ago. Very nice guy.
Yeah. 40 years with St. Johns County. Like more than 40 years, 45, I think he said. Randy Fine, and almost all of our city council members, which took up a huge chunk of time because we've gotten plenty of them.
Yeah, right.
And so, but I love that part of my job too, because it establishes relationships. I wear a different hat. So I tell everybody, look, this is not investigative Emily Turner. This is
right. So
like
you call, come on my show. Or are you like, well, why do you want me on?
There are some who won't. Yeah, there are some who still won't come on, and that's fine. They, it's all right.
You seem like a nice person. I'd go on your show.
Well, you can come on. No, I try to be. I'm sure there are people who would argue not, and if I'm after you for bad behavior, they are probably not thrilled about that either. It wouldn't call me nice, but
yeah. Well, wrapping this up, so I know a lot of people out there admire you on the things that you've done. Like, if somebody wants to get in this field, remember young Emily going to Purple Porpoise in UF, and like, man, I want to get into journalism. I want to be an anchor. What's your advice?
You go to a university, if you're that young, go to a university that has a practicum-based school where they have a TV station.
So the university definitely makes a difference now.
I think so.
Yes.
I think so, because there's so many laws around internships. Like it used to be, I did so much unpaid labor. I learned how to pick a soundbite. I was writing packages for free when I was at First Coast. Now, like, you have to pay your interns. And so you don't, and there's all these legal things, like you can't ride along you have to drive your own car. I mean, I like jumped in the car with Grayson Comm and Joe Massa. I went to a hurricane when they were driving through Gainesville. We ended up changing the intern policy because of me. Sorry, Jimmy Valet. But they, I was afforded that opportunity. So being able to do it at least in school, and then if you can find an internship so you can at least shadow, because this isn't the kind of field where it's like, I go home and I put my work away.
No.
And I work. You're going to work awful shifts. It's going to be a long day. You're going to be sweaty, but then you got to look good on TV at the end of the day. People are going to curse at you or curse during your live shot. You work a holiday. You work weekends. Like Dr. Pachter, who taught the first news writing one, was like, who likes their free time? Who likes your weekends? Who likes your holidays? Who wants to? And it was like, okay, well, y'all can walk out the door right now, because this is not what you're walking into. And so I would say, if somebody really is serious about getting into it, you need to see what it's like. Can you handle all of these other things? Because 2% of it is being on TV.
Right.
Like, if that.
Right. Don't do it to be famous.
Oh, no. That's what YouTube was created for.
Right. Exactly. Well, this was super interesting. Thank you for your time. It was awesome learning about you and some of the stuff you've done. I know Hometown Jax listeners are going to love that. So thank you very much, Emily.
Thank
really
you. I appreciate it.
Thank you. The Hometown Jax podcast is recorded and produced by First Coast Mortgage Funding, located in the heart of Jacksonville. Do you want to be our next guest? Visit our website at hometownjaxpodcast.com. We can't wait to hear your story.